بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ويضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله خير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. We continue today inshallah with the discussion of the hadith number 27 I believe in an-Nawawī's 40 hadith. And in the last two lessons, we went through the explanation of Shaykh Muhammad bin Salih al-ʿUthaymīn, raḥimahullāh, and the Shaykh gave an explanation of the two hadiths which are in this chapter or in this section. And these two hadiths, the hadith of an-Nawwās bin Samʿān radiyallahu anhu and Wābiṣah radiyallahu anhu, in these two hadith, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained, or he gave us a definition for what is al-birr, which is righteousness, and a definition or a guideline as to what is al-ithm, which is sinfulness. And with respect to al-birr, he said that al-birr is husnul khuluq, which is the good, beautiful mannerisms and characteristics. And so as part of the explanation of this hadith, in the last lesson we were going through some of the characteristics of good manners, makarimul akhlaq, and this was taken from Shaykh al-Ḥudhaymīn raḥimahullah himself, and we looked at some of the forms and types. So from them we discussed number one, first of all, that when someone cuts you off, meaning in the relationship or in the tie, then you connect it back again. And this was the first characteristic, or the first good, noble characteristic, which is from the good manners. That when someone does something to you, maybe he oppresses you, maybe he doesn't fulfill your right, maybe anything along those lines, that you don't return with the same thing, rather you connect the relationship again. So this is what's called to tie the connections. That's the first characteristic. The second characteristic we looked at was birrul walidain, which is the righteousness to the parents. And we explained that in Islam, that the people who are the most worthy of a person's righteousness and good deeds and reaching good towards them is the mother firstly, then the father, and then we have obviously a hierarchy. Then you have the children, and then the brothers and sisters, and then you have the near relatives, and then it continues in this manner. And so after the birrul walidain, after that we looked at silatul arham, which is tying the ties of the family, keeping them tied. And this refers specifically to obviously the blood relations, and that whenever you have problems in the family or breaking of ties, that you strive to bring them back together again. And that this is from one of the greatest and the noblest of the characteristics of a believer. And then after that one, after the third one, we looked at the fourth one, which is the neighbor, your neighbor, and how the neighbor has been given a very important status and position in Islam, to such a degree that the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would say that Jibreel would keep coming to me and speaking about the rights of the neighbor so much that I thought that the neighbor would receive a part of the inheritance. Meaning that, his position is so great that as if he would, just like the blood relatives, would have a right of the inheritance. So, and likewise the Messenger ﷺ, he said he negated Iman from the person whose neighbor is not safe from his evil. Right, so he negated Iman from the person, but the Iman which is negated is not the asl of the Iman, but it's the perfection or the completion of the Iman. So this shows that the neighbor has a great right. And then we explained in accordance with what the Shaykh said, that your neighbor he could be, it depending on who your neighbor is, there could be different rights which he has. So if the neighbor is a blood relative and he's a Muslim and he's your neighbor, then he has 3 rights. He has the right of Islam, everything which Islam, the rights of Islam, that when you meet him, you give him salams, when he's ill, you visit him, when he sneezes, you say to him, Ya raḥimahullāh, and all the other rights, when he's ill, you visit him, and all the other rights, when he seeks your advice, you advise him. That's the right of Islam. And his honor, his blood, his wealth is protected from you. That's the right of Islam. Then you have the right of the right of the near relation. He's a relative as well. So he has obviously good, excellent behavior and preference and so on and so forth. And then thirdly, the right of the neighbor. So 3 things apply to him. So depending on who he is, he could be a Muslim who is not a relative, then he has 2 rights, the right of Islam, who is a Muslim, right of Islam and the right of a relative, or he's a non-Muslim, so he has the right of just being a neighbor upon you. So all of this applies, so you look at who your neighbors are, what their status is, and then you know how to behave towards them. And that's where we finished in the last lesson, and we finished at the end. I mentioned a story of an example of how a taxi driver in New York, in Bangladeshi, how he returned a large sum of money that was left in his car, and how this created a really good impression of Muslims just through this this display of honesty and truthfulness and with the non-Muslims. And how this is different because we have some people who have a way of thinking which is incorrect, and they live in these countries, in these non-Muslim lands, and they think that just because Muslims are oppressed in the Muslim countries, therefore it is permissible to oppress the people living in this country. Now, this is wrong, and this is incorrect. This is not justified at all. And so from the ideas of these people is that they say you can steal their wealth and you can commit crimes and you can take their women and so on and so forth. Now, this is batil. This Islam has nothing to do with this kind of behavior or these kind of ways of thinking. So this brings us now, we're going to continue now from this point. So that was in the last lesson. We're going to continue now, inshallah ta'ala, to mention some more of these makarim al-akhlaq, these excellent manners, 2 or 3 more, inshallah. And then we'll continue with the explanation from Shaykh Salih al-Shaykh. So number 5, the Shaykh says that also from the beautiful, noble characteristics, which is part of al-birr, which is part of husn al-khuluq, is showing benevolence, meaning kindness towards the yatama, which is the orphans, and the masakeen, the poor people, and the ibn al-sabil, which is the traveller, the person who is travelling. So regarding the first one, al-yatama, this refers to orphans. The singular is yatim, and the yatim, the orphan, is someone whose father has died before the child has reached the age of bulugh, meaning before he's reached puberty, or the age at which he's now responsible, and he's in his mind he's aware and responsible. So this is the definition of a yatim, of an orphan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's commanded, we find in the Quran many verses which mention that this is from the qualities of a believer, that he do good to the yatim, to the orphan. And in a hadith, likewise, we see the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, he greatly praised this characteristic. And the reason for this, the Shaykh explains, is that when an orphan, when his father dies, we see that in essence the orphan's heart is broken, and he knows his father's gone, and he's in need of gentleness and kindness and so on and so forth. So to show ihsan, to show benevolence to this child, is something that will comfort him and relieve him of the loss of his father. So the Muslims in general, they behave with him as if a father would behave to his own child, in order to mend and to fix this problem in his heart and in his soul and in his way of thinking. As for the masakeen are those who are poor, the poor and needy. And likewise in the Quran and in the Sunnah, we've been commanded to be benevolent and kind towards them and to provide for them. So for example, if we treat them, if for example they need food, then we give them food. If they need clothing, then we give them clothing. If they need just for example, the Shaykh says that you when they come in the gathering and you behave good with them, you behave nice with them, and all of this is part of, showing good manners towards the musākīn, the poor people. As for the third one, the musafir, then the traveller, then likewise in the book and the Sunnah, we've been ordered to aid and support and help and honour the traveller in terms of when you take him as a guest in your house. And this is because the traveller has left his home, has left his family, maybe the environment is strange for him, he may be in need of food, maybe in need of drink, maybe in need of shelter, whatever. So to aid and support the traveller is from the noblest of characteristics. This is number 5. Number 6, also from the noble characteristics, is to honour and to be gentle with, and the word uses the Shaykh uses the word al-mamluk and the khadim. Al-mamluk means anything that you own, anything that you possess. And the Shaykh here gives an example particularly of like beasts. You might have beasts, you might have, for example, cows, you might have camels, you might have sheep, you might have, things which you own and which you possess. And so the Shaykh says that with respect to these animals, these which you ride upon, or which you milk, you take milk from them, or whatever you keep them for, then likewise you must show rifq, a gentleness towards the animals. So for example, if you put them in a warm place in the winter, right? If they can't handle the cold, then you put them in a warm place. And if in the summer when it's very, very hot, then you provide them with a cool place. And so in this manner you behave with them and you attend to their needs, you give them the drink and whatever, the suitable drink, the water, whatever else you need to give them. This is also from the makarim al-akhlaq. It even applies to animals. Not just, it's not just people, it's to animals as well. And this shows obviously the great concern that Islam places upon an individual's character, as the Messenger ﷺ said in a hadith that indeed, verily, I have been sent in order to complete and perfect the akhlaq, the noble manners. So it's as if this whole deen of Islam, and like in this one hadith that the Messenger mentions, that it is geared towards the perfection of the morals and the manners of the people, of the Muslims. Right? So this shows that Islam has a concern not just to the relationships between the people, but likewise even animals and even plants, for example, like trees and other things like this, because we have other rulings in Islam from which we can see that we also treat the environment and like the greenery and the trees and the things, that we also treat them with respect. The 7th point that the Shaykh brings is that from the makarim al-akhlaq is that you abandon certain qualities. And from those qualities is al-fakhr, which is boasting. And secondly, the second one that he mentions is, the way you would, it's difficult to translate, but you would basically say, I suppose pride, maybe pride. So the first one is boasting, the second one is pride and arrogance, and the third one is al-istitala. Again, it's difficult to translate this, but it's like when you believe that you have like possessions and wealth and whatever, and therefore you are better and higher than other people. This is istitala. So we'll discuss these three inshallah. So the first one, al-fakhr, which is boasting, then this is like when a person, the Shaykh gives an example, when someone starts saying, I'm an alim, I'm a scholar, I'm rich, I'm brave. He starts mentioning these qualities about himself. This is boasting. And this is not permissible in Islam. And like he says so he can also make this even worse. So first of all, he boasts about himself, but he can make it worse by adding another quality, which is when he looks down upon other people. So he says to the other people, well, what are you compared to me? You are nothing compared to me. And so in other words, he now makes the situation even worse. So the Shaykh mentions a verse in the Quran which addresses this type of person. In Surah Al-Isra, Surah 17, Allah says in the Quran, وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا إِنَّكَ لَن تَخْرِقَ الْأَرْضَ وَلَن تَبْلُغَ الْجِبَالَ طُولًا. That Allah says, don't walk upon the earth out of like pride and arrogance, because indeed you cannot tear open the earth, nor will you reach the mountains in their length, in their height. So meaning that you're nothing. Don't walk upon the earth as if you own the earth, because you don't have the power to rip open the earth, nor will you reach the height of the mountains. So meaning you are nothing. You've got nothing to be boastful about. You've got nothing to have pride about. You don't walk upon the earth like this. So the Shaykh says after this that it is wajib upon us that we have at-tawadu, that we are humble, humility, in both our speech and in our action. And don't start praising yourself with those qualities that you have, that you think are good, or which are good, unless there is a need to do that. Unless there's a need. The Shaykh gives an example of where this might apply. He gives the example of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, and he was one of the most knowledgeable of the companions. And so he said, if he said that if I knew of anybody who had more knowledge of the Book of Allah than me, then I would have travelled to him in a camel. If I had come to travel to him, I would have travelled to him. So, and then he also said, so from this the Shaykh says that what he means here, there's two things that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud means. He means to say, number one, first of all, to advise them to learn the Book of Allah, because this shows the greatness of the Book of Allah, that if Ibn Mas'ud knew someone more knowledgeable of the book than him, he would travel to him to learn. So this shows, firstly, knowledge, the importance of seeking knowledge. And secondly, he meant, what Ibn Mas'ud meant, radiyallahu anhu, is for the people to take the knowledge from him which he possesses, to benefit from the knowledge. This is what he means. He doesn't mean to boast and to have pride and to be arrogant, but he means that he means that I have the knowledge of the book, come and take it from me, because knowledge of the book is something which the Muslims must possess and must have. So, where there is a situation, and obviously a Muslim can say, like, to give another example, if a person has knowledge of inheritance, he has knowledge of inheritance, which a lot of people may not know and understand because it's complicated, then he tells the people that I understand, I have the knowledge of inheritance, now come and take it from me, because this will benefit the Muslims. Not because he's boasting, but because it is a benefit that the Muslims need in their religion. And so this is how it is. And then the Shaykh continues and he says, or he mentions the next thing, which is al-baghi. So he mentions a number of things, al-fakhr, which is boasting, and al-baghi, wal-udwan, wal-istita. He mentions a number of characteristics that we should avoid. So al-baghi and al-udwan, which is to transgress against somebody else, to go beyond the limits with respect to somebody else. And this happens, as we mentioned before in the previous lesson, in relation to three things. The Messenger said, "Inna dima'akum wa amwalakum wa a'radakum alaykum haram." That indeed your blood and your wealth and your honors are haram upon you. And this shows that a Muslim is protected in terms of his wealth, his possession, what he owns, in terms of his blood, meaning his life, and in terms of his honor, meaning his reputation. These three cannot be transgressed. You can't transgress against these three with respect to another Muslim. It's haram. And so al-baghi and al-udwan, which both mean oppression and transgression, is when you go over the limit with respect to another Muslim's wealth or his honor or his blood. So in the wealth, for example, it is when you claim something to be yours which is not yours. You take someone's possession, you take maybe, it could be his land, could be his house, could be his property, could be something that belongs to him, it's not yours. So you've now transgressed in his wealth. And with respect to blood, is obviously when you kill someone wrongfully, you murder someone, this is haram, you've transgressed against their body and their soul. It could be either death or it could be wounding somebody, harming somebody. And with respect to al-a'rad, which is the honor, then what is meant by the honor is a person's reputation. So you transgress against his reputation by backbiting, and you start painting a picture of him which is not correct. And, so all of this, the Shaykh says, is haram, and it is not from the characteristic of a Muslim. At this point, I should make one clarification here, which is that there is an exception to speaking about another Muslim. And Imām an-Nawawī raḥimahullāh, he actually mentions it in the same, in his other book, Riyād as-Sāliḥīn. He has a chapter in which he discusses some of the exceptions as to when you can speak about another Muslim, and it does not count as backbiting, nor does it count as the taking his honor or attacking his honor. Rather, this is something which Islam makes permissible. So from those situations is, for example, when a woman seeks a man for marriage, so she seeks a man for marriage, and so a person wishes to know about this individual. Is he suitable for marriage? What are his manners? What are his characteristics? What is his deen? How is he upon his deen, and so on and so forth? Here, this does not count as backbiting, nor does it count as taking his honor, as long as the truth is spoken about him. This is one example that an-Nawawī gives. The second example is, like for example, those who openly commit sin and who call to sin and that which is haram and who cause corruption within the society. Then it is permissible to talk about them, to backbite them, from the angle of protecting the society from their evil and from their sin. A third example is those people who innovate into the religion. The innovators, they bring new ideas, or they bring new beliefs, or they bring new forms of worship which are not in the book and the Sunnah, or which the companions did not know. So they in essence, these people, they make tabdeel, they change the religion, just like the Jews and the Christians changed their religion, because they brought things from themselves which Allah did not command them with, and then they claim those things to be from the religion. So those people who innovate into Islam, whether they are beliefs, whether they are statements, whether they are actions, then they are distorting and changing the religion, and so it is permissible to speak about these people and to speak about those mistakes which they are making in order to protect the society from the mistakes. So when we speak about, so it's important to understand that in a Muslim, his honor, his wealth, his possession is prohibited, it is haram. Allah has made it inviolable. However, there are certain exceptions to this, and whenever we have these exceptions, then we shouldn't start wrongly thinking that this is backbiting, or this is slander, this is taking this person's honor. This is not correct. And obviously, this is a subject in and of itself, and maybe we can discuss this on a separate occasion, inshallah. So this was number 7, and so coming to the next issue, which is al-istitala. Al-istitala is when, for example, the Shaykh says, if Allah has given you a certain bounty or a favor, maybe you have lots of wealth, maybe you have like a status and honor within the society, or leadership, or maybe you have knowledge, or maybe you have something, then when Allah gives you this, that should make you more humble. It should make you more humble towards Allah. But as for when you start saying, for example, you start claiming that you are above the people and you are better than the people, and then this is wrong. This is what is called al-istitala, meaning that you, because of something Allah has given you, you then consider yourself to be better than the people and higher than the people and whatever. It is even worse when you do this when you don't even have that quality to begin with. So for example, a poor person now thinks, claims he's rich, and he tries to think himself above and beyond the people. This is even worse, because you haven't even got what you're trying to boast about and what you're trying to make yourself better than the people about. Likewise with knowledge, likewise with status, likewise with honor. It's even worse when you don't have that thing. So these then, inshallah ta'ala, this is the end of the Shaykh's discussion of the makarim al-akhlaq, and all of these qualities and characteristics we should aim to act upon and to develop, inshallah ta'ala, because all of this is from the birr that Allah has commanded us in the Quran. So now we move on. So we've been through the explanation of Shaykh Muhammad bin Salih al-Ḥuthaymīn raḥimahullāh. We will now move on to some brief comments made by Imām an-Nawawī himself. So this is Imām an-Nawawī, the one who put together these ahadith. So he says, we'll quickly go through this inshallah ta'ala, he has just a page. So he says, al-birr husnul khuluq, so he's commenting upon the hadith that birr is the good manners and characteristics. The Shaykh says that in summary, al-birr is something which is an easy affair. You have a light tongue and a light face, like a pleasant face, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has explained all the different types of birr in the Quran. Then he mentions a verse in the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah in which Allah explains what birr is, to believe in Allah and the last day, and then he mentions the pillars as well, to pray and to fast and whatever. All of that is from birr. And then Imām an-Nawawī raḥimahullāh, he says, wal ithm mā ḥāka fī nafsik. Again, the same thing we remember, that sin is something which moves about in your soul. Meaning that your soul doesn't feel comfortable with it. And the Shaykh says, an-Nawawī says that this is a proof to show that a man can return back to his heart when he wants to act upon something, or when he wants to do something. And so if his heart feels at ease with it, then he does it. If his heart does not feel comfortable, then he removes it. And then an-Nawawī says that there's another hadith at the beginning which he quoted, which he mentioned, which is to do with the halal and the haram, in which the Messenger said, al-halalu bayyin wal-haramu bayyin, that the halal is clear and the haram is clear, and in between the two are doubtful matters. So Imām an-Nawawī, he's saying here that this hadith about those doubtful matters which are ambiguous and not clear, that it applies here as well. That what the Messenger said about these affairs, that when you come across a doubtful matter, then go back to your heart. If your heart does not feel comfortable with it, then you keep away from it. So he says that this hadith applies also to the mutashabihat, the unclear affairs. Then an-Nawawī says, he mentions that there's something reported about Adam alayhi salam. This is something that's been transmitted. And he says that Adam alayhi salam, it is reported that to his sons, he gave them certain pieces of advice, 3 pieces of advice. The first advice that he gave to them was, when you wish to do something, then if your hearts are shaken or moved, then don't do it. Because indeed, when I came close to the tree, to eat from the tree, then my heart, ittaraba qalbi, meaning that my heart like moved or it shaked or whatever, when I was eating from the tree. Meaning he felt, according to this narration, that he felt uncomfortable with it at the time of eating from the tree, which Allah had prohibited him from. That's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice, he said, when you wish to do something, then look at its end result. What is its consequence? What is its outcome? What is its aqibah, its outcome? Because if I had looked at the outcome of eating from the tree, I would not have eaten from the tree. Okay, so first thing is to do with the heart. Second thing is to do with look at the outcome of your action. And the third thing he said is, when you wish to do something, then seek the advice of the good people. Because indeed, if I had sought the advice, if I'd consulted and discussed with the angels, then they would have indicated to me, they would have directed me to not eat from the tree. So seek the advice of other people. So you see, in essence, there's 3 things mentioned here in this advice. Number 1, how you feel in your heart. Number 2, look at the consequence and the outcome of your action. And number 3, seek the advice of other people first. Right, so it's a good narration that an-Nawawī has brought here, which actually, in essence, it summarizes the entire hadith, like the 2 hadith that we've looked at. Then he goes on and he says, the next part of the hadith, وَكَرِحْتَ أَنْ يَطَّلِعَ عَلَيْهِ النَّاسِ, that ithm is what moves about in your soul, and which the people dislike, that you dislike that the people should see about you. He gives some examples. Of this, and now he says, an example here is when you want to marry a woman, and it has been said that this woman was nursed or breastfed by his mother or someone, on account of which this woman would become haram upon him. Because we know, for example, when a child is born, for argument's sake, and the mother gives it to another woman to have that child breastfed, if that child is breastfed more than 5 times, then that child is considered to be, that child now, if that woman has any children, that child now becomes like in essence like a brother or a sister, right? They're called foster brother, foster sister. And so therefore it would be haram for this woman's children to marry this foster child, right? So now, what the an-Nawawī is giving an example, that if someone wants to marry, if this, let's say this boy, he grows up and he now wants to marry, and someone says, oh, by the way, did you know that you were foster mothered by such and such, whatever? Right? Someone just says it, and now there's an issue of doubt, and now it's doubtful. So an-Nawawī says that this would be, that a person thinks, and he thinks, well, if I married now, what would the people think of me? If he thinks that they're going to blame him and find fault with him, then obviously now in his heart he feels that thing. If he feels that thing, he knows then this is ithm. He knows that this is wrong, and he should not now proceed into the marriage. This is the example that an-Nawawī he gives here, that that you dislike the people to see from you, to know about you, meaning that they know that you've married someone who might actually be haram for you. Another example he gives is when there's some wealth, for example, and it's haram. This wealth is haram, and you wouldn't want the people to know that you are eating and feeding yourself from that which is haram. So basically, you keep away from it. And a third example an-Nawawī gives is when you have a trust, like you have let's say there's a trust or a charity or something that some people have gathered together upon. It's like they call it, like was also like something which is like a waqf, which is something which is given as a trust, and then you start taking from it without the permission of the owner. Then this again is from, you know yourself that if the people knew that about you, they would not like it. And you know that in your mind, that they wouldn't like it. So when you realize that, and you know that the people would not like to see that from you, then you know that is a sin. Now you know that this is a sin, so you have to keep away from it. So these 3 examples an-Nawawī has given as to this outward criterion that you don't want the people to know about you, and therefore you know that this is now a sin. And finally, he gives some more examples to do with the same hadith, so we can inshallah finish there. Now we can move on to Shaykh Salih al-Shaykh, and we'll try to conclude the lesson inshallah ta'ala with Shaykh Salih al-Shaykh. So I'm going to go through this quite quickly because some of it is a repetition of what we've covered previously. So he begins first of all by saying that this hadith is from the al-Ḥadīth al-Jawāmi', which is to do with those ahadith which the wording is simple, but the meaning is profound. The meaning is deep, and the meaning is great. Then he says that this husn al-khuluq, these righteous characteristics, then he says that this occurs between Allah and His servant. So a servant has husn al-khuluq towards Allah, and likewise between the servant and between the people. And then he says, with respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it is the servant, he has iman in Allah, he has iman in whatever Allah revealed, and he fulfills the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the same as what Shaykh ibn ʿUthaymīn mentioned. Then he brings an ayah in the Quran, وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرْ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالْكِتَابِ وَالنَّبِيِّينَ وَآتَى الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ ذَوِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ وَالسَّائِلِينَ وَفِي الرِّقَابِ وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَى الزَّكَاةَ. In this verse, Allah says that birr is to believe in Allah and the last day and the angels and the books and the prophets. So all of these are the issues of belief, of iman. And to give the wealth, even though a person loves the wealth, that he gives it to the near relatives, to the orphans, to the poor people, to the traveller, and to those who ask. And then he continues, and he mentions that like the pillars of Islam, establishing the prayer, establishing the zakat. So this shows al-birr is made up of iman and of Islam. The iman, which is in the heart, the belief, and Islam, which is the outward actions that we perform. the pillars and other good deeds. This is birr. So this is between a servant and between Allah. This is birr between a servant and Allah. As for the birr between the creation, then again we've covered this in detail before, and the Shaykh says that al-birr towards the creation is represented in husnul khuluq, in good manners with the people. That's how you do birr with the people. And this is that you are generous, badlun nada, as we said, that you withhold harming the people, kaful adha, and that you behave with the best of manners with the people. Right? That you, if someone does evil to you, you return it with good. And if someone harms you, then you pardon them, you forgive them, you control your anger, you control your anger, and you generally be benevolent and nice to the people. So this is birr towards the people. Then the Shaykh goes on, and he moves on to the second part of the hadith, that ithm is what moves about in your soul, and which the people that you would hate the people like about you. The Shaykh has a nice explanation to this. He says, if you look here, you will see that Allah's Messenger has given you two criterions. One which is internal, one which is external. One which is internal to you in your heart, which is something moving about and you don't feel comfortable in your heart or your soul. And the external criterion is that what the people think about you, what the people perceive about you. So the Shaykh says that these two things, one which is tied to the heart and one which is tied to the people, that a person uses both of these things to help him to understand or to determine what is birr and what is ithm. So we covered this previously in detail, so we won't need to go through all of that in detail again. Then the Shaykh continues further, and he says that there's an issue here. In fact, we'll go through this inshallah ta'ala because it's probably beneficial. He says that there are three situations that a person might find himself in. And of these three situations, we need to make clear which of these three situations is the hadith referring to. So the first situation is, a person comes, situation number one, a person comes and from his ignorance, from his jahl, in his heart he has a doubt about something. But this thing is actually from Islam, it's from the Sharia, it's from the Sunnah. But in his heart he has a doubt about it, meaning he doesn't feel right about it. Now if this person acts upon this doubt and keeps away from that thing, he is sinful. Right? So we understand that. The Shaykh gives an example of when the Prophet ﷺ, he ordered some people that when they were travelling and they were fasting, he said, break your fast. So some of the people broke their fast and other people did not break their fast. And when the messenger came to know that these people, they did not break their fast, then he said, those are the disobedient, those are the disobedient. So from this, we see that when a person travels, he has a right, he has the permissibility. It's permissible for him to break his fast. This is from the Sharia. You don't have to fast as a traveller. So now, if you come along and you are travelling and you're fasting, and in your heart you have this hesitation, like this, ma haka fi nafs. But here you are doing it in relation to something which is from Islam. And if you were to act upon this doubt and this wavering in your heart, this would now be a sin for you to do that. Why? Because this thing is itself from Islam, is itself from the Sharia. This is similar also to when you travel and you are allowed to shorten the prayer. When you're a traveller, you can shorten Dhuhr and Asr and Isha. You, instead of praying 4 rakahs, you pray 2 rakahs. This is permissible in Islam. And some people, when they travel and they see other people shortening the prayer and they pray 2 rakahs because they're travelling, in the heart they have this, they think, is it right or is it not right? Here, this is, for you to have that wavering and this doubt, this is not permissible. Why? Because we are talking about an issue in which the book and the Sunnah are very clear and they have permitted and they have legislated. So here, this is wrong. This is wrong. That's the first example. The second example, or the second situation, is when you have a situation, for example, and you have two views from two scholars. There's two different views from two different scholars. And you're not clear about which is right or which is wrong. What should you do in this situation? The answer here is that obviously you look at each of the two situations and you just follow that which is from the most knowledgeable scholar, that which is the most pious scholar, that which is the most knowledgeable scholar, and then you take one of the two. But it's not permissible for you now that just because you are doubtful about which it is, that you now go and take a third opinion, which is something that you've thought from yourself. So you say, I don't know whether this is right or whether that is right. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and feel what I feel in my soul. This is not right. And this hadith does not apply to this situation either. You understand? So it doesn't apply to the first situation, nor does it apply to the second situation. Rather, in this situation where you have two views of two scholars, don't go and invent a third one yourself, because you are not an alim. Rather, follow that which you see to be most correct from those two scholars. The third situation is the one that we are speaking of in this hadith. Right? So this is where the hadith applies. And this is, the Shaykh again, he gives an example of that. He says, this could be, to give an example of this situation, is where you go to a scholar, you ask him a question, let's say, for example, it is to do with a business transaction. You tell him some details, and then the scholar, he gives you an answer, but inside your soul, you know that this doesn't appear to be right. And the reason is because you know that the Shaykh didn't ask you all of the details. He didn't ask you all of the details. Or you didn't tell him all of the details. Or the situation wasn't properly understood. And so therefore he gave you a ruling, and inside your soul you know, and you know that it's not right. Yeah? This is a situation where this hadith would apply. So therefore, if you feel uncomfortable, then don't go into that business transaction, or don't do that action, or whatever it is that you're going to embark upon. So this is the type of situation that we are speaking of, where the hadith applies, and not to the previous two situations. So we need to be careful and understand that, we've discussed this hadith for 2 or 3 lessons now, that we understand clearly in which situations it applies to, and which situation it does not apply to. Then the Shaykh, he finishes by giving a summary. He says, just to summarize and finish, that these are 3 situations. First of all, 2 of them don't apply to this hadith. Number 1, when there's an issue which is clearly legislated in the book and the Sunnah, and from your ignorance, you do not know whether this is, it wavers in your heart. I said you can't act upon that type of thing because this is from your ignorance. Number 2, and this hadith does not apply in that situation. Number 2 is when you have different views from different scholars. They've given you a fatwa, for example, and so you just follow that which is more clear, more apparent, that one which is taken from the most knowledgeable of these 2 scholars, the most understanding of these 2 scholars. And the third situation here is when you have a ruling from a scholar, but you know that it's not based upon the proper full details of the situation, and so therefore there is still some element of doubt left, and so therefore in your heart you feel uncomfortable. In this situation, you act upon what your heart tells you, that you keep away from that thing. And that's the end of what the Shaykh has said, and inshallah that's the end of our discussion of this hadith, and it's the end of this series of lessons on this hadith. So inshallah ta'ala, maybe we have we've come to the end of the time as well. So inshallah ta'ala, in the next lesson we will begin the next hadith, which is a very great and mighty hadith. It's the hadith of the companion Al-Irbad bin Sariya, and this is a hadith which relates to the splitting of the Muslim Ummah and the importance of sticking to the Sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ and to the Sunnah of the rightly guided Khulafa, and being aware, keeping away from those newly invented affairs in the religion. This is a very important hadith. So inshallah ta'ala, our next lesson, our next series of lessons will be upon this hadith and from the benefits of this hadith. So with that, inshallah, we conclude today's lesson. Announcements? Okay, no announcements, inshallah, so we'll finish there. Same time next week. Same time, inshallah ta'ala, 5 o'clock next week, and we'll commence with this hadith then, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullahu khairan.